So one of the things that I've got to admit that I find a little bit annoying, uh, probably with everybody, is you adapt a new piece of software, a new solution of some sort, and um, and it doesn't work as you expect it to, right? Um, and you sort of build up this framework around what you could potentially do, and and then in some sense, like you hit a first obstacle that you have no control over, right? It's always a challenge with like outside vendors and bringing other people in, that it is great when it works, but then when it stops working, it becomes really annoying. And so practically one of the things that I'm really, it's painful right now is I feel like I have started recording these daily videos as I'm just going throughout my day, and I cannot export them. I can't descript. This is otherwise amazing application that I've used, that I absolutely love for content creation, for creating videos. And all of a sudden I can't export any of my videos. I can't publish anything. And then you realize, you sort of go into these situations and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to reach out to their support team, but then I've got, 15, 20 other things to do today. I don't really have time to spend the effort and the mental bandwidth going back and forth with their support team just to figure out how their software should function when it really is their software that should be functioning, right? It shouldn't be my responsibility to figure out why their software is not functioning properly or what is breaking. But the reality is, at the same time, I think that's one of the real challenges of adopting so many tools. We live in an age where there are amazing tools. You can do so much with the tools. But one of the things that we can never, ever forget is our awareness is the most precious item that we have to control. And where we choose to put our awareness, what we choose to focus on, how we choose to react, or we have sort of built-in reactions that happen to us, instantaneous emotional reactions that will happen to us, or, moments of anxiety or stress or something that'll hit us, a thought. And it's really then our choice to figure out, okay, well, how do we respond to that? What do we do with that? And, I keep coming back to the same thing. The reality is, the hard part about life, and the hard part certainly about entrepreneurship, is really mindset, so much more than anything else. And a lot of times what you'll hear people translate things over to is they'll talk about tool choices or strategy or vision or what their opinion of another company is. And the reality is, what they're not talking about is everything that's going on inside. A lot of times they're not talking about that. Some people, I think more and more people are talking about that. But I think that's actually really the critical thing to dive into, right? What's going on inside of you? When you see another company do something and you have a reaction to it, what is that reaction? Where is it coming from? And again, what's going on inside of you? It's not to say that the reaction, it's not a question whether the reaction is right or wrong. It's just a reaction. But the question is, where does that reaction come from? What is your response to that reaction? Does that reaction cause you anxiety? Does it cause you stress? Are you able to bring yourself back and realize that, okay, well, listen, if you just look at it with a level head, Amazon can release whatever they want to release in AWS, and it doesn't not mean that your business is going to die. Things like that, right, are constant pain points for people. Like, oh my gosh, there's another competitor. Then you start looking into it and you realize, well, hang on a second. All the logos on their website are all these giant brands, but that's not who I'm going after. I'm going after the lower end of the market or whatever it might be. And the reality is, even if it is an absolute direct competitor, even if they're directly competing with you, they're coming in and surprising you, the question still becomes, okay, what's going on inside of you? Because one thing is for sure, in my mind at least, that if your reaction to those things is one of panic and anxiety and stress, you're not going to make good decisions. And so having an understanding of what's going on inside of you, in my mind, is critical for making successful decisions and not letting your inner world turn into a turbulent tornado, hurricane, where you're not really making decisions. You're just reacting. And I think that's one of the really important things for all humans, for creators, for builders, for entrepreneurs to master, is understanding, where is something coming from? Is it my intuition that's trying to peek through and speak to me? Or is it my neuroses? Is it my anxiety? Is it, where's this coming from? Because I'm a big believer in intuition, power of intuition, to help make, it's a very inexplicable thing still to me, but this experiential felt knowledge, sometimes that you approach decisions and you just say, hey, here's what I think here's what we need to do. And, I'm not saying in some mystical, magical sense that is always the right thing to do. I think many times, though, in that moment, it is the right thing to do. It's the right decision to make. And I have found, at least for myself, that when you make a lot of decisions from a deeper point of intuition, even if you change those decisions later on, there's a certain higher sense of flow with those decisions. And at least for myself, there's a higher sense of equilibrium with those decisions. Again, even if I change those decisions, or even if I, need to adapt those decisions as time go on, it's, or totally move away from a particular decision that was intuition based. I don't think we're trying to store up a collection of perfect decisions. I think we're trying to navigate, and we're on an exploration. And in that process of exploration, we have to make decisions. But what we certainly don't want, I have never had a good decision made from anxiety, panic, or stress. And even going back into, being in war zones, we didn't react that way in special operations. That was actually one of the most astounding things to me that I ever saw, was being with a regular Army unit who's attached to us for a short time. And there was a couple of people in the unit that you could tell in this particular, it was just a basic, patrol that we were doing. It wasn't even, we weren't even going on an actual direct action raid. It really was like average day to day, like just driving around a city. Like my personal stress level was, 1, 2 out of 10, right? I think most of the guys on my team were probably in the same place. And then was able to see these couple of regular Army soldiers, and they were clearly much closer to a 9 or 10 on the stress level. And from just this sheer sort of thought of being outside the wire. And the determining factor there in my mind, I'm not saying that to like point fingers at them and saying that it was somehow their fault. I think the determining factor that I took away from that is training. And the training that we received in special operations and special forces, there in the qualification course, was such that we spent a lot of time in connection with understanding stress and our own personal reactions to stress, and mastering how we manage stress, how we manage those instantaneous reactions, and how we trained ourselves to not be guided by those instantaneous, reactions that will happen to you, right? The natural human reaction when you hear an explosion is not to run to the explosion. And that's really what we trained ourselves to do in special operations. And so that puts you in a very reflective mode. It's a very interesting combination. We spent a lot of time ruck marching. We spent a lot of time quiet because we're out in the woods doing patrols. I'm talking about during our training course here. And while at the same time, it's punctuated by these moments of intense action, right? Intense and violent action, right? Where we are practicing, an ambush. We're practicing a direct action raid. And it's a very interesting meeting with your own inner world throughout that entire process, challenging yourself of what you think is possible. But again, even just the simple facts from my own personal experience, the simple fact of the hours spent with a really heavy rucksack on your back, walking through the woods quietly, and you're looking around, your head is on a swivel, you're constantly checking things, but at the same time, you have to learn this sense of calm, of like nearly, whimsical attitude about it, right? Like, yeah, I've got 100 pounds on my back and it's uncomfortable and I haven't eaten, in 48 hours and we've only slept 2 hours, the past 72 hours. But it's a really interesting meeting with your inner world and the stress levels and reactions, and while having to maintain composure throughout the entire process. And I think that is, I tell people all the time, I think I learned more realistically from special forces about how to be an entrepreneur than I have from, countless different books. And I've learned a lot from books, but there's so much of a certain essence that realistically I picked up in special forces. And so, yeah, we have these tools. It's a frustrating point that I'm figuring out right now, right? How do I get these videos exported? It's kind of annoying. While at the same time, you got to balance that with what else is going on? What else do I need to accomplish today, right? I can't spend my entire day just solving this. It doesn't help anybody move forward. It doesn't help our clients move forward. It doesn't help our team move forward. And such are the fun moments, right? In an early stage venture, managing everything and all of a sudden, just one vendor can throw, a giant wrench in already a movement that is lacking resources inherently because of the stage that we're at. So that creates a fun encounter with your inner world every single day. So one of the things that I'm working on, I came back yesterday from the great conversation with an entrepreneur who has done an amazing job working on a company for 25 years, and that we're in conversation around me coming in and acquiring the company and continuing the growth of the company so that they can really go off and focus on many other areas, that a couple of other areas in some sense that they've moved higher up the stack, if you will. Meaning, you start addressing customers, right? And you start solving their problems and you realize, well, okay, there's this like one set of problems that that we see with customers, but then there's this whole other class of problems that starts coming up, like that is a blocker, right? We start running into, how do we make them successful with this product? And as you're in the process of trying to make them successful with the product, you keep running into, this sort of, I don't know, what I call like a higher level problem, more abstract problem, right? And so this entrepreneur in particular, working on this company for 25 years, done really, really well. But the focus has shifted up to the higher level problem, which is in and of itself a very big challenge and something that has a very large impact on many people's lives. And again, I'm trying to be, vague a little bit here because I don't want to go into, I don't feel at liberty yet to talk too much in detail about the specifics in a public manner. I don't think that would be appropriate. So trying to be vague while still capture the essence. And also try to say, there's different phases in life, right? people do incredible things and then they start shifting, and sometimes it's hard for people to understand. Like if an entrepreneur has created a really successful business, why would you ever leave that? But I think it's actually like a very reasonable, and I think it's the right choice for a lot of people to move on, because as like I'm describing, as they start solving one problem, they start running into I'm calling a higher level problem. Meaning, what I mean by that is usually, if you're this is a totally distant example. This is not actually practical to this this situation, but if you are if you're an oil change shop, right, and you realize that you get really good at changing people's oil, and you get really good at changing people's oil. It's only natural that you start moving into, well, you start solving people's problems, and they start telling you, well, like, I know that I need to change my oil more regularly, but I just can't get there, and it's like the life's overwhelming, right? And then you start spending a lot of time talking with people about how overwhelming it is, and how something as simple as an oil change actually reveals this larger struggle that people have. And then you start talking with people about that larger struggle that they have, right? And it moves up into, in some sense, like a totally different level, totally different, plane, where like one of the symptoms of that is difficulty just taking the time to go change your oil, right? Totally simple example. But I think that happens all the time. And so it's not, entrepreneurs very frequently, I don't think they, I think it's relatively, they don't necessarily burn out. I think many of the, the CEO of NVIDIA, I was listening to an interview on the Acquired podcast the other day, and they were asking, what would you say to a first-time entrepreneur sitting down, in Denny's and trying to come up with an idea? And his response was, don't do it. And basically the idea that he was trying to communicate was, if you're going to ask somebody else's permission to be an entrepreneur, then, and you're actually going to listen if they tell you to stop, then you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. Then you're probably doing it for some ulterior motive. It's not just, it's got to come from some internal drive. And so if somebody comes to you and says, don't do it, if you have that internal drive, and it really is what you should be doing as an individual, then you're not even going to pay attention to it anyway. And if you don't have that drive, then you shouldn't be doing it anyway, right? And again, this is without making any value judgments of, like, not everybody has to be an entrepreneur. I think that's, one of these messy things that we get into, where we because I'm an entrepreneur, that I start running around saying everybody should do this. Well, I think everybody needs to find out what they should be doing for themselves, right? And for some people, for myself, for example, it's entrepreneurship. And many entrepreneurs will find themselves in a very similar situation, very similar style, very similar, there's a lot of overlap patterns that start to emerge. And one of them is just this development that takes place. And you start with oil changes, and then you start moving on to higher level problems. And you start unblocking people on the challenging issues that lead to delayed oil changes, right? And then that becomes really powerful, and you start really wanting to invest your energy over there. So that is largely what I would say is happening in this case. As I go into this project, which I will call Phoenix for the moment, sort of the first step, we're sort of essentially at the phase where we've agreed to move forward, right? That and what that really means is to continue the conversation around the acquisition. So just as I'm typing there, now's the moment to dig deeper. What do I mean by that? We've essentially reached the phase of having alignment on intentions. And then there's the next step of, okay, let's ultimately, sort of the process of countless different projects, countless different ideas in life is generally you're starting out with a hypothetical, some spark of an idea or something that that you start that triggers this flow down into more concrete things, right? So a project starts with an idea, a spark of an idea, and then you got to work through it, and you got to sort of have conversations. There's different ways of working through it and increasing your understanding of so that you can judge, okay, do we continue on with this, right? It starts out purely intellectual, and then it starts transitioning, and sort of the path as it develops is really a path to where ultimately you're ending up in a very practical, concrete steps, right? Because ultimately, really, it is the moment between the spark into ultimately decisions being made, and decisions made and decisions communicated and disseminated out to a team. And so the reality is, though, the gap, a lot of the effort, I think, most of the conversation yesterday really was around that alignment on sort of the higher level pieces, right? Is this the right moment? Is the right time? Am I the right person? Just all of those situations, right? What are all the different layers of, what are the different aspects of the 25 years of work that went into the company so far that have gotten the entrepreneur to where they've gotten? And there's a whole lot of history there, right? You can't erase. I mean, 25 years of work on something. And so it's really like it, but it's much more of I don't want to trivialize it by any means by saying this. There's a very heavy emotional aspect to it, right? A lived aspect to it. It's not just information on a spreadsheet. It is 25 years of somebody's life. And how do you capture that all down and bring it down, concretize it into leading up into a quote unquote single moment that will define, oh, okay, now I'm passing this off to somebody else. That's huge for somebody that's been working on something for 25 years. It's a big deal for me if I've been working on a project for a couple of months to pass it on to somebody else, much less if somebody's been working on something for 25 years. So, so we sort of start out on this one side where a lot of it is the initial flow of making sure there's the same page, the same understanding, alignment. There's a high level of comfort. But then we've got to sort of move on to the next stage in the flow, which is like, okay, now the spark of an idea. The spark of ideas is sort of, in this case, I would say, now we've sort of transitioned from the original idea of, that started with like, maybe this is a good fit, to we've agreed that it's a good fit. And now it's the next thing of the phase of getting a little bit deeper and understanding, okay, just like a relationship, right? What are the different aspects? The different, like a diamond, you hold up a diamond, right? And, you hold up a diamond and, you see all these different, all these different shades, right? All these different, I don't know what you want to call them. All the different angles and all these different, aspects of the diamond, different perspective of the diamond. And you can sort of dive into it and sort of say like, oh, it's a beautiful diamond. You can start there. But really, ultimately, as you get more concrete in any project or any venture, you got to start really understanding all the different curves of the diamond or the edges of the diamond and really the particularities of it, so that you can get to a place where you can make a decision around things. Since that's really what ultimately, again, should be driving a company. It really comes down to the decisions that you make, conversations that you have, the actions that you take. So you got to sort of go from this very high level down into the very concrete. And so for me, for the moment, for this, really, I'm just starting to capture some of my thoughts around that, right? And so, here it really is, gathering all of the detailed financials, ideally over the past, at least, ideally for the life of the company. But, that may not be, I don't know. We'll see. Start there. Start with sort of the perspective of, give me as much of the financials as you possibly can. And then essentially what I want is, I want exposure to all the different products, right? Like I want to start getting into really understanding all the different products. So, samples of each product, samples of each product, samples or demos of each service, and then I would say the most important thing, that's trying to get a capture. Ultimately, what am I trying to get to is like, what is the phase line in some sense here, right? Is like a complete and accurate or a detailed business model canvas. And for anybody not familiar, a business model canvas is something that I think is very important and useful and very helpful for understanding different things, right? So Alexander Osterwalder was at least the person that I found out through an author, researcher, because ultimately the entire model is really the company or the product, right? It's not just one SKU, one item that's sold on a shelf that's a product. It is the entire model that makes it up. And so I ultimately want to understand the current situation, and really what I'm working towards is understanding, being able to fill in all the boxes here, right? And so, so I would say this actually, that really actually helps me even as I'm thinking through this, right? And this is where I would walk through, like here I'm just sort of capturing ideas, but the reality is really I need to go back through this then and in more detail. And actually what I'm going to do right now is, because I've got other stuff to do, this is a moment where I build out the project ultimately for reaching the objective. I'm just going to say build out this project, accurately capture the next immediate actions. So this is not something I'm going to do right now, but I'm going to schedule it. Let's see, we're the 7th. I'm going to schedule it for the beginning of next week to do this. And so really the first step is here, I don't actually want to, quite sure why that's not moving around, but so what is really the objective? The objective is in understanding a snapshot, or understanding of the current situation / state of company. Yeah, the question really then is, okay, to do what? Like, what am I trying to, in order to start defining opportunities for growth? So I'm going to say a key result of this is a completed business model canvas. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it there. Really, it's a completed business model canvas. Yeah, because right now I'm just aiming at understanding, right? It's a separate stage of like actually generating and starting to find opportunities for growth. Subjectives. And then also to bring this up, there's 10 sort of universal business objectives. Yeah. So this is a book that I wholeheartedly suggest for everybody. I don't know whether this might come the wrong reflection, but Product Roadmaps Relaunched. Because I'm thinking as I'm putting this together, I'm like, really, what am I aimed at? Is I'm aimed at putting together a roadmap, right? I think in terms of products, and but again, the product is the entire business model. And so it's really, how do I put together a roadmap? What does it mean? What are we going to do next? Where are we headed? Right. And so one of the things that I very much like here, I really like what what the authors of this have done. I really think it's a great book that I suggest strongly for everyone to pick up, but to really understand all the different pieces of it, not just gloss over things. They've really captured a lot from many different sources and people that I very highly respect. And what am I looking for in particular here? I'm looking for the universal business objectives. So they have, I don't think this is probably not going to be visible, but there's universal business objectives, and come out here. Let me see, actually. Oh, I don't have it open. But so for example, well, I'm not gonna go into it right now, but let me see if I can find them. The 10 universal business objectives, product roadmaps relaunched. Maybe this is it. Maybe this will be a good. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So this is a good overview of it. So 10, this is actually from the book. This is like an overview of the book. And 10 universal business objectives, right? And they have them in a couple of different categories: sustainable value, growth, profit. Maybe just those 3 categories, I guess, now that I'm looking at it. So sustainable value is essentially all around the core product, how do you create value? There's one of the ideas that we take from really successful companies is such as Intel. When I say successful company, I immediately, in this particular context, I'm not saying that's the only successful company, but in this particular context, what I was actually thinking of was Intel and Andy Grove, right? One of Andy Grove's piece of advice is you can really max focus on 3 objectives at the same time. And the ideal is that you're focused on 1 objective at a time. And so laying that out in an already functioning business, this is very clear as well. I will say there's different phases. So early stage startup where you're just still trying to get to product market fit, this is the wrong things to be focused on. You don't even have anything yet. So you can't even sustain value until you really reach that stage. And so the discovery process is different than the scaling out process. And so that there needs to be a clear demarcation of that. In this particular situation, this is already a company that's running. They already have product market fit. They've been running and doing quite well and growing well over the years. And so this is really about how we scale that out. And it's not about reaching product market fit. And so there's a couple of these key areas, right? How do you invest in the current product offering? What are opportunities to grow that product offering? Meaning maybe you have, examples here again. Can you take the same product and maybe shift it into, through some projects? And this is where you can set an outcome objective. Here's what we want to do. We want to grow our market share. Okay, fine. What does that mean? Practically, that's where you create a strategy. You create a hypothesis of opportunities. What are the different opportunities we see within the market to grow our market share? You focus entirely on that. Let's grow our market share. And then what are the different opportunities that we see? And then what are the different solutions to those opportunities? How might we attack this problem, right? How might we grow our market share? And then you start putting projects in place in order to actually make that a reality. So I think those steps are very important of how you think through this thing. So for example, if you just look at this list and you say, oh yeah, we're going to do all that. You can't do all that. Why? Because everything has to be concretized in an actual project. And that's how you move things forward. You have to start, and this is my opinion, you have to start with the understanding that you might be wrong. And so any project that you have may be totally the wrong project to be investing your time in. So you need to set some sort of metric, some needle that we're looking to move. You can't move 50 needles at the exact same time. You have to move particular needles, right? That's the best case scenario, right? That was one of the things that Andy Grove, focus, right, here is really critical. And so you need to be able to focus in on what is important. And once you have that objective set, we want to grow our market share for any particular company, right? We want to grow our market share. Then you're hypothesizing, again, the opportunities that you see to do that. That ideally comes through a continuous discovery process, meaning you are constantly talking with your customers, you're constantly talking with non-customers, and you're constantly improving your understanding of the needs that your community of people have. Those highlight opportunities. Opportunities for growing your market share tend to be different than opportunities for, say, adding a new product line or offering a new aspect of the value proposition. So you come up with those opportunities. You set the objective, growth. We want to grow what sub-objective? We want to grow our market share. You take all the continuous discovery that you're doing and you start plotting that out of opportunities. What opportunities do we see for growing our market share? Then you break that down. This is an opportunity solution tree idea here from Teresa Torrance, which I think is a very important for people to, very useful for people to really understand. Teresa has done amazing work on this. Continuous Discovery Habits is a important book, I think, for any product leader to dive into. And so this particular idea here of the opportunity solution tree is precisely what I'm describing. You have a desired outcome, objective that you want to get to. You start breaking it down into what are the different opportunities that we see to do that. And usually that will break down into groups of opportunities. And then you start going through the different opportunities. And then you come up with solutions. And then each of those solutions is tied to a project, we would call it, or an assumption test. There's usually assumptions that you're testing along the way. You do that through projects, right? So the actual activity is you're breaking down through projects. So that's really what personally I want to get to in this, right? What am I trying to aim for? What am I trying to build up to? I'm trying to build up to capturing a current understanding state of the company such that I can then go and formulate a roadmap and formulate, here is where I think we need to go as far as the objectives, right? As far as, again, here is where I think the opportunity is. Do we need to increase the profit margin, right? Is that the key thing? Or do we just need to grow? And, you know, investing in the dynamics of growth are very different than investing in just trying to increase the profit margin. Or are we just focused on the sustainable value? Are we just focused on adding to the product line? And that is all of our focus right now. And I will be very particular about this. Many people have this false belief that the best path is to divide and conquer. I have universally seen that as a bad. It doesn't get you bad. What do I mean by bad? That's not a very helpful term. I have not seen that get the results that people desire. what I have seen get far better results is when people focus all of a team's effort on achieving one objective at a time. And one of the challenges is that people don't see how the entire business model is all interconnected. And so that becomes a challenge because they don't understand that the product is the business model. And so what they tend to say is, well, if we're focused on growth, that's just a marketing function, right? Like me as someone who is servicing clients say, what does that have to do with me? But the challenge is understanding that if you in a customer success role, say, or speaking of a member in your team, if you don't see how your activity can help drive in some way creation of sustainable value, if that's the objective, if growth is the objective, let's say market share, let's stay on the market share example. If you say to yourself, well, that's not my job, I don't see how I can do that, that's a sign of dysfunction in a company. That's not a good sign. Because again, it is the entire model. Every single piece of the model needs to be in place. And the entire model should be focusing on growing market share. And laying that out, what does that mean? How do we grow market share? And every single part of the business should be impacted by that. Everybody should be able to say at any given moment, somebody should be able to pull them off to the side and they should be able to say, hey, what are we doing right now? What is our number one objective in the company? And they should be able to say, it's growing market share. And what are you doing in order to do that? And they should be able to answer you what they're doing in order to do that. And it should be real. I think that's one of the challenges I've run into. And usually it's because an individual contributor on a team will not know. It's very common. They'll have a really hard time saying, here is the contribution that I'm making. And here is how it is impacting this business objective. Universally, when I've run into that personally, the result, it has always been the downstream result of a lack of clarity in the leadership team, where actually the leadership team is not focusing everybody on that one objective at all. And so it's actually total confusion because you have this individual contributor that's really actually doing something totally different and is actually moving forward a totally different objective. But that's totally hidden from everybody because the leadership team has not taken the time to really nuance out all the different requests that they're putting on the individual contributors. And so they sort of go about this like, the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing and like act as though everything is in sync. And it's only by words that everything is in sync when everything is totally out of sync because the individual contributor on a team cannot say how they are helping move forward the larger objective, right? And this is really tragic. This is something that really bothers me because I think it really does a disservice to all of the people that are really pushing forward a company and a team. There's a beautiful story that I think really resonates with me and always has of what you want a team to feel like. And there's one scenario, I can't remember exactly which president was or something, but it was back in the 60s. And I'm pretty sure it was a president that was visiting a NASA facility, I think in Huntsville, Alabama, where they were working on the Apollo program for putting people on the moon. And this president in question, or vice president, I can't remember the full story, runs into a janitor in the hall. And he says, hey, what do you do here? And and the janitor says, runs into a gentleman in the hall, I guess I should say. And this gentleman says, well, I'm helping put people on the moon. And, this president, he says, really, tell me about it. What particular part of the rocket are you working? And he said, no, I'm making sure that all the engineers can focus, right? He's like, okay, tell me, how are you doing that? I make sure that all the restrooms are really clean. I make sure the halls are clean. I make sure that there's no distractions, right? I make sure they're not slipping on anything. I make sure, right? What is he doing? He's helping put people on the moon. It happens to be that his role in doing that is keeping the office clean so the engineers can concentrate, right? I had a rabbi once make a really interesting comment to me that, how common it is for us to forget that, like, if a neurosurgeon goes on strike, it has a profound impact on a small group of people. If all the trash collectors in a city go on strike, right, it has a profound impact on a lot of people. We often forget that all the different aspects of these roles, right? And they all have to line up. Everybody at NASA had to feel as though they were putting a man on the moon. And whether that meant you were cleaning up the restrooms and the hallways and the trash bins, whether that meant you were an engineer building a component on a rocket, whether that meant that you were a planner who was trying to coordinate the logistics of getting the right equipment in the right place at the right time, whether you were the mechanic that made sure that all the valves on a test site for a rocket engine were properly lubricated. Everybody was helping get a man to the moon. So few projects that people experience in their life are actually like that. And most of it is the responsibility of a leadership team. And the struggling moment for most leaders is transitioning from individual contributor into a leadership role and understanding that now you're moving a team forward by your thoughts, by your speech. And your work as a leader is clarifying all of these things that I'm going through, right? It's clarifying, having a really clear understanding of what is the business model? What is this project? What is the linkage between this growth that we say we want to have in the market, right? And then the opportunities we see to do that, right? And how does it contribute to all the different aspects of the business model such that someone who is cleaning the hallways can ultimately be able to say, I'm sending a man to the moon, right? That's the goal. So for me as well, practically speaking, it's the goal of this project, right? Charting the course of understanding what is the current state. And I need to come back in and fill that in, understand the current state so that ultimately I can come back and start defining what's a roadmap look like.